Hi, Daniel. I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to speak to you today. How are you?
Good, good, good. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time. Maybe for people who aren't aware of the series yet, maybe you could just give us a brief intro. What can people expect when they watch Becoming Karl Lagerfeld?
Well, it's a journey back to the 70s to the fashion world in Paris, and we get to know a young Karl Lagerfeld before he became the famous, iconic fashion designer. And you see him struggling, trying to conquer Paris, having to compete with a man who was already a god, the young Yves Saint Laurent. Then there's also a very intense love story that is very beautiful and something that most people, I would guess, wouldn't know about. At least I didn't. So we see a very different Karl Lagerfeld than the one we would probably have in mind when we think of him.
And what do you think the fascination is with this figure? I mean, I think it goes without saying he was such an icon, he was such a distinctive figure. But I guess, why now and why the fascination? I guess it's been 5 years since he passed. I know there's another film in development with Jared Leto. So obviously it's something that people really want to explore on screen.
Yeah, I mean, recently people have gotten an appetite for these fashion designers, and I was just particularly thrilled. Maybe partly because I'm German, to play one of the most relevant and most mysterious and fascinating figures in recent times in this world. I love the contradictions in human beings, and this part offered so much of it, so many extremes. He was a pop icon in the limelight on the one hand, and then he was a very lonely intellectual man on the other. He was a businessman, but also an artist and creator. He was a fashion designer, photographer, an illustrator. I mean, he was a chameleon. He was thousand things at a time. So obviously, for me as an actor, that was such a rich material to sink my teeth in it. That it's been a gift to play this guy.
Yeah, in some ways you might think it was like the role that you were meant to play in terms of, the fact of you having your multilingual abilities, et cetera, et cetera. But, where did you have to start in finding this character? And when someone does have such, an image in people's minds, you kind of maybe have to get behind that. So did you return to the biography? Were you relying on the script, looking at archival material? How did you find your Carl?
Yeah, all of that. I mean, the scripts were the fundament, but then I started reading four different books about him. I luckily found a lot of material because he was such a good self-promoter, even back then, that I could find interviews with him as a younger man, and photos and documentaries about him. Then I met people who had spent a lot of time with him and knew him really well, because by these, conversations and relationships, you find out things that you wouldn't find in the books. Drawing lessons, fashion lessons at Chloe in Paris. Then French, I had to polish my rusty French and so forth. I mean, it's a long preparation to feel at ease and to feel ready to incarnate this complex man. And then ultimately you have to do it. The tricky thing was to forget about all these thousands of voices in my head putting pressure on me, because everybody knows more or less Karl Lagerfeld and has strong opinions about him, at least in my country. I had to get rid of all that pressure and just go for it.
And do you think it's significant? I mean, it's more an origin story really than a biopic. The fact that it's focusing on this time period where he was making a name for himself and putting this kind of the rivalry, this unconventional LGBTQ plus love story front and center. It feels like it's kind of a fresh spin on what could be, maybe more of a straightforward biopic.
Exactly, yeah, and I would have been bored by that, So I loved the approach, and in a way, it reflects also who Karl Lagerfeld was, and at least was at that time, I wanted to show an insecure, young, vulnerable, but also very hungry man who wanted to conquer Paris, and he was more prêt-à-porter than haute couture. When I think of the show Balenciaga, it is more haute couture, like Balenciaga was. I thought it was a very, very good show, and the way they did it, but more elegant and more about the fashion, so to say. I found it refreshing that it is also in our case this love story that you mentioned, that it is about this competition and this love-hatred relationship that he had with Yves Saint Laurent. It's a broader world. And it's about the human beings behind, these famous names and the famous guys that then they later became.
And tell us a bit about working with your fellow cast as Arnaud, as Yves Saint Laurent, as Theodore and Alex, and how did you kind of work together on, finding the layers of all those dynamics?
Wonderful bunch of actors, incredible actors, and I love them all, each and every one of them. This has been such a privilege to be invited to dance with these guys, and especially with Theodore, who was demanding for us because it was such an intense and bizarre love relationship that we had to play. And if you feel that chemistry, and if you reach these heights where you have moments when there's absolute truth, and you get like a fever, you're electrified because you think like it feels so real. This is the very reason why I love my job so much. It's for these, sometimes it's only seconds, but they give you a kick for 10 years. So in this series, I can say that we've reached a climax, and in various moments acting wise. And so if the journey should continue, or any other adventure, I would so much love to work with Theodore Pellerin again.
And in terms of, these sets, I mean, there's just no denying, what a visual feast the whole show is. And being immersed in that 70s fashion, all your costumes, all these amazing sets. Did you learn a lot about the fashion world, I guess, through living and breathing it in that way? I mean, I heard you making a joke about when you first were setting foot on red carpets and the fashion world was perhaps not so known to you. So do you feel like you know a lot more now and maybe have a different kind of perspective or respect for it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the respect has only increased. We had the best costume designer, and we needed it, obviously, in a show focusing on fashion. So Pascaline Chavan did an incredible job. It was a pure joy to go back in time and wear these extravagant clothes. But before starting the show, I was thinking of another friend of mine at Zegna, Alessandro Sartori, who became a friend. We've known each other for 20 years, and he helped me back then to not look ridiculous on red carpets anymore. So since then, I've had an on and off relationship with Zegna, and he made me understand how tough it is to be a fashion designer, how hard it is to survive in this crazy world, how persistent you have to be and creative, and how much discipline and focus and pressure there is in this extremely brutal fashion world. So since then, I always took fashion seriously. I didn't think of it like something superficial and silly, but I knew that there are people behind that who work incredibly hard. And that helped me when I was thinking of, playing Karl Lagerfeld, to think back of the conversations that I'd had with Alessandro.
Thank you so much for sharing all that with me.
Thank
Huge
you.
Congratulations on the show. It's so amazing. And I can't wait for everyone else to see it. I think it's out today. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.